Good morning. This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it's time for Avoid the Maze. The maze is our life. Truthfully, we can't avoid it, but we can find ways through it. And that's what I think is so important. So many of us, as we're going through life, something happens, we get stuck, and we say, oh, woe is me. My life just isn't going in the direction I want. However, we do have choices. We can turn around and go back and start all over again. We can turn to the right, turn to the left, or maybe sometimes we can scale that wall. We have options. And it's really important. It makes no difference if you're 5 years old or 95 years old. You have options, and it's up to you to decide if you want to take them. My guest today I met on podmatch.com. Her name is Bernice McDonald. And Bernice, you've written a book called My Story, Brave Enough to Be Myself. And that's all I had to see in your bio to say, I relate. And I think every client I've worked with in the last 3 years is going to relate. So tell us your story.
I am so glad you used that. And it's wonderful to be here, by the way, Karen. I'm glad you used that metaphor of the wall across the path, because that has been something that has stuck in my mind for several years. I've used it a lot in my writing and my coaching, because I see us as walking a path in life. When we're born, we come into the path. When we die, we leave the path. In between, we have all these decisions to make about how we're going to live our life and who we're going to be. Often walls come down across our path, and that's when we have to decide, do we go around, like you said, or do we scale it? So, excuse me, as we're walking that path, let me tell you I'll tell you a segment of it, in not in depth, don't worry, not
Okay.
going to go into
It's
every
okay.
nitty gritty detail, but on my 19th birthday, I cried all day. Every time somebody would say happy birthday, I burst into tears, which made my family very puzzled. But what was happening in my mind, this is just the kind of person I am, I was observing the adults in my life who were probably in their late 30s, right? My parents, my aunt and uncles. And what I was seeing was like almost a bitter attitude toward life, that life is so hard, it's difficult to be happy. There's so many burdens, there's so much. And it was like I was saying, I don't want to grow up. I don't
Right.
want to get past my 19th birthday if this is what it's going to be like. And I actually was complaining to God. And I said, I don't want to get older. And it was like I heard this voice coming out of nowhere that just said so clearly to me, then don't be. And it was like, okay, I have a choice. I can live my life differently. Now, that doesn't mean it instantly happened.
Yeah.
Fast forward about 4 decades, and there I am standing at the top of a zip line platform because it scared to death, hanging onto a tree as if I like, picture a cat with their
Yep.
paws around a tree, right? I was terrified of heights, and I didn't even realize how terrified I was until I got up there on that first zip line platform. The reason I was there on that zip line platform was because through all those decades, I had been up hills, down into valleys, through a divorce, struggled with bulimia, all these things that came up for me out of fear. And I had decided I was going to wake up my courage. And so I was doing all of these things that terrified me. You know how Eleanor Roosevelt has her famous quote, do something that scares you every
Right.
day. Well, I was taking that to heart, and I was doing scary things that began to wake up my courage. I was already that was just when I met my second husband. So I was in my mid 50s, and I had decided I was going to do some scary things. So I walked on fire at a Tony Robbins conference. I zip lined, I went whitewater rafting, all these things that were just so out of character for me at the time. But during that, because I did those things, I am now able to take some of that courage that I learned I didn't know I had into everyday life, into building a business, into relating to people, into doing scary things that I have watched women so often just shrink away from as they get older. And that breaks my heart.
Well, I think women in our age range, and I'm talking about boomers who are, 60 and up, we've been taught that number one, we're female first. Then as a female, you have certain obligations, whether it's to your marriage, to your family, to your job. And I don't think my parents meant to bring me up so rigidly, but as I look back, they had certain things that they expected. And when I didn't meet those expectations, they didn't disown me or anything like that, but you could tell they were disappointed. Um, and I carried all that disappointment with me my whole life. Well, if I didn't do that well in high school and now I'm going to college and I'm really not taking the courses I want to take, well, I'm not going to, and I automatically, I'm not going to do well. And I started blaming all my, I'm not going to do well on my upbringing. And I did that through my 50s.
Wow.
And I realized one day I can blame my upbringing, but I've been away from my parents a long time. So whose fault is it? And I looked in the mirror and I said, it's me. Now, I don't think I would go ziplining. Okay. I have to tell everybody out there, I am totally terrified of heights. And probably the first climb I'd start to make, I would just faint, be on the ground.
I
But
totally relate to that.
but there are other fears in my life that, yes, I have faced. And to some degree, I continue to. Our fears, it doesn't have to be as abundant as what you did. And I think it's great that you tried all these things. But I love how you say it starts with a tiny, brave step at a time. And that could be just walking out your front door.
Yes, exactly. And I don't encourage women to do the kinds of things I did. I was hiding this adventurous person inside of me, though. I had always been, just like you are saying, so afraid that I wasn't living up to the standard, that I was always being measured against other people, and I was always finding that I was lacking. And that was the mantra really I lived with all of those years too, because I was also, I think it was the era. I was also brought up in a religious home, a Christian home. And so, there were pretty stringent things that were, it was the era of the rules, which has changed now.
Yeah.
But then it's like if you're not up here, you are not enough. And that's what I grew up with. So I needed to prove something to myself by doing that. But as it came around, I realized even in those big things, it still took tiny brave steps because, well, I actually learned I met my fear, and I name it Fred now, because fear, and psychologically there's basis in this, and neuroscience, there's basis in this. We need to step away and observe ourselves. And so I was told, actually, when I was dating between my first and second marriage, that was a terrifying experience. And so I heard this from a coach, and she said, yes, you're going to be afraid because you're trying to do things that are outside your comfort zone. And I was in my early 50s at this time, so I was no spring chicken. But like you, it's like I had an awakening at that time. And so she said, what you can do is you look that fear in the eye. So step away from it, see it as a separate entity from you, and say, thank you, my fear, for wanting to protect me because it's a built-in protector,
Sure.
right? It does want to keep me on the ground, keep me safe, keep me from falling off a cliff or off a zip line platform. And and so, you say, thank you for wanting to protect me, but it doesn't know the difference between actually going to being, about to die and about to do something that is just nervous, makes you nervous.
Sure.
So that's where you say, thank you for trying to protect me, but I'm not going to die in this situation. I really need to do this to grow. So I'm going to be the boss and I'm going to drive the car. You can come and sit in the back seat. That's fine. I will still hear you talking and I appreciate your warning. So that's good. But I'm going to drive this car. And so then you make the decision about going forward and about doing the thing that is scary, as I'm sure you can talk about in your experiences, Karen, right?
Right.
Doing scary things.
Absolutely. And it's interesting that your your awareness happened between the marriages. Okay. And that probably helped you, number one, meet your husband, because I know, as somebody who's gone through a divorce, whether it's mutual or one-sided, you still feel like, what did I do wrong? Who else is going to love me if this person didn't love me? And I remember going through that. We had only been married 7 years. We had a young child, and I had given up a lot to be in this marriage. Number one, moved away from my family, and my family cried all the time. You're with his family, not mine. But during that time, from the moment that we split up until I met my current husband, I was afraid to look at myself in the mirror. Now, I've been married 41 years. My husband is the type of person that only sees the good in me. I can be a raving lunatic, and he'll say, "Oh, but you do this and you do," and I'll fight him on it, like, "Oh, forget all that." But the reality of it is, we need somebody in our corner, but it has to start with us. So, for out of the 41 years we've been together, it's only within the last 10 or 15 that when he says these nice things, I go, "Yeah, you're right." Because now I believe in me. So if somebody else can believe in me, that's even better. So what made you
So
decide to
beautiful.
actually write your book? Because we all have a book inside of us. Um, Mine just keep coming out in blogs, because uh, the thought of actually putting it all together right now, it's not going to say it's scary, but it's overwhelming for me. So how'd you go about this?
Well, I'm really glad that you talked about relationships because that actually what helped me. I've been a coach for like 22 years, part-time, because I had to survive after my divorce. I had to go to work full-time, and that was just when I came to be a coach. That was about 21 years ago, and so I started investigating more coaching courses around relationship to help myself understand, like you said, I didn't know myself. I needed to learn about myself and I needed to learn about relationships. What does a good relationship look like? What does a good man look like?
Yes.
And what kind of good man do I need in a relationship? So I just say that because that led me into relationship coaching, where I worked with women for quite a while who were struggling with the same thing we're talking about, many, many fears out there, and many of them choose to just stay safe and not go after a relationship. So over the course of those 20 years, well, I met my husband after a lot of work on myself, and it was the most beautiful thing. He rescued me when my car wouldn't start one night, and I took a brave moment, a tiny brave step, and said yes, because it was winter. I live in Canada. It was very cold. I was tired. It was Friday night. My car wouldn't start, and he overheard me calling the car service, and he said, I have booster cables. If you need some help. And so that was how we met. And so as time went on, and he also is the most beautiful man who, 13 years we've been married. I wish we would have 41. But, he always just says to me too, I love that about you. Do not change that. And that just enhanced how I saw myself. And it helped me to be okay with learning to love who I was. Well, you know what? Coaching is a tough gig. It's very difficult sometimes to get clients to know exactly how you want to coach, the people you want to coach, to bring the value that
Right.
you're meant to bring. So over time, up until about 3 years ago, I left my paid job. I retired unofficially, not in my mind, but from that job. And I went full-time coaching, joined the business community, and I thought, this is hard. It's really difficult to have impact. And so I needed to one thing hone in on what I needed to coach on. And I hadn't quite got there yet. And then how I was going to do it. And so I was in a mastermind group and it came out that, hey, I love to talk about courage. I love to empower, to give women the freedom to actually be okay with who they are, and then to go out and do amazing things that make them feel so alive. And so I thought, I had been hearing a lot about coaches writing books to support their business. And I thought, I'm going to write a book, but I'm not just going to write one book. I am going to write a series of books that are in small bites because it's a very
Right.
quick consumable society we live in. 3 seconds, and if you haven't got their attention, they're gone. So I decided I'm going to write a series of books called The Little Books of Courage. And each one is going to address one of these areas that we women struggle with, that we're afraid, and I came up with a framework, a 4-step framework. I'm going to apply that in each of my books. And I thought, the first one, of course, just needs to be, everyone is going to be called Brave Enough To. And then I thought, of course, the first one is going to be Brave Enough to Be Myself, because literally, as short, as full of white space as that book is, it's my heart on paper. And, it's what I had to learn first, was to be so grateful to be the person I am, to have my own strange jewels, as I call them, to handle fear the way I've learned to handle it. And so I wanted just to put it into a simple way that's deep and yet easily, you can go through the book very quickly. There's a lot of journal prompts. There's a lot of quick exercises you can do. And it just seems to be such a good talking point for me now on podcasts,
Sure.
everywhere.
Absolutely. And you brought up a word that I think is extremely important. It's called strengths. And I shared in a podcast yesterday that when I was still in the corporate world, one of our directors came to us and said, we're all going to take this test, and it's going to show our strengths and weaknesses. And so I took the test, and it came out, and I had like 3 or 4 strengths, but everything else really, to me, was a weakness. And I thought, oh, look at all this I have to work on. What am I going to do? And we went around the room after we got our results to talk about it. And I just started crying. I said, this can't be true. Look at all these things I have to work on. And they said, like what? So of course I started with the bottom one, and I'm going all the way up. And somebody said, well, what are your strengths? I couldn't even absorb them, but I read it off. And then they said to me, so you know what you're going to do? You're going to keep working on those strengths. I said, but I have got 10 weaknesses, I'm falling apart. And the comment was, those weaknesses will get stronger if you work on these 3 areas. And that's what really propelled me into coaching, because too many of us get to a point that we think, what is wrong with me? We only see all the things that are wrong, at least wrong in our mind. And so that weighs us down. how can I move ahead? It's like I tell people going to coaching is like going on a diet. It's all that weight is not coming off day one. You've got to find your pattern to work on it. So, yeah, there's all these diets out there and all these exercises, but they may not work for you. So, you're going to have to tweak them. The same
That's
way you're going
right.
to tweak that diet, you're going to tweak yourself. And
Yes.
usually I tell them, find one thing, I don't care how big or small, when you look in the mirror, what do you want to change? And sometimes the easiest thing for us to change is go and get a new hairstyle. And that opens you up. You say,
Yep.
oh, okay, look what I did. Oh, I don't look the same as I did yesterday. Oh, I like how I look. Now that you like that look, and now go deeper inside. What does that look inside of you that you want to change?
Yeah.
The sad part is, and I don't know if you get this, but there are too many people out there who believe that because we come into coaching a lot of times because of our own problems, that we are not qualified to coach.
Yeah.
When you come across that, how do you help that person understand that number one, they're helping you, but you have this experience. So how do you encourage them at that point?
Well, I like tell me first, what were your strengths? Can you tell me? Because then I'll answer that question.
uh, One of my biggest strengths is I'm a giver, an
Yeah.
overdoer. And see, I thought that would mask everything else. And when it didn't, you know, and I was asked one question, which was really important. Do you like giving? I said, not anymore. And the answer, and the question was, why? And I said, because I never hear thank you. And they said, do you know why? It's expected of you because that's what you do. It's number one up here. That means you're
Yeah.
putting all your time into giving. And I remember saying, but can't somebody once in a while say thank you? They said, when you start giving and it's not expected, guess what? People, and then the other question was, are you doing it to be thanked? I said, no, but I never know if somebody appreciates it. So I had to
Yeah.
learn to knock that down a little bit and not spend my whole life. Oh, Bernice called and she needs milk because, she's not feeling well. She can't go out. Oh, I'll drive to the other side of town, Bernice. I'll get you your milk, Well, you were too sick to say thank you, but I
Yes.
didn't recognize those things. Or I went out and did something for you before you even really asked me to. And it was like, well, I guess she wanted to do that for me. So we
Yes.
we have to dig deeper inside of us. And
Yeah.
my first way that I did that, um, my son basically said to me, Mom, you're depressed. And I said, No, I'm not. He goes, Yeah, you are. He said, Go in the other room and think about it. You're telling your mother to go in the other room and think about it? But I did. And I thought about it. It was like, yeah, I'm tired of doing for others. Hey, but that's my strength.
Yeah.
Okay, but there's a way to work on that.
Yeah.
So, you
Yeah.
know, that's what we
And
got.
that's where I think like giving is a beautiful strength and like what you just illustrated, but there's always um the risk of overdoing and overextending ourselves. So then we get that resentment, right? Like, oh, this is expected of me now. It's like, but when you're actually, this is how I help women who are actually because it's like part of my framework, wake up your courage, but then embrace who you are. Like, love the fact that you love to give, for example. You like that's an amazing quality. That is a hidden jewel. And sometimes something that we see as negative actually holds such clues for us to say, this is a beautiful thing about you. This is how you were made. Think of all the possibilities of how you could make a difference in the world by using this strength. Then the third part of the framework is to stand up for you. So that is then to say, okay, this is who I am. I'm learning to be brave enough to be this person. However, there comes a point where I need to draw lines in the sand and say, this is what I'm comfortable with. This is the energy I have. I can't do this right now. However, maybe I can find someone else, or maybe I could do it later, or, you know, let me think about it, those sorts of things. Like, you need to stand up for who you are so that you become very comfortable being yourself,
Exactly.
very comfortable to just protect and cherish the person that you are. As we were talking about earlier, energy is so important. So if it's draining you, you're not going to have anything. And that's a fourth part of my framework, is then from those three things, you go out and make an impact. So
Right.
then you live your purpose. So you then can design how you want to take those beautiful strengths in the way that works for you out into the world so that you can make a difference. So that at the end of your life, you're feeling as if you've created some kind of legacy, you've left a footprint on this earth.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Well, I have a little quote that sits on my computer, and um, one of the coaches that I work with, um, every once in a while, she'll say to me, "And how is that working for you?" And I heard it over and over again. And finally, I was
Mm.
sitting at my desk one day, something wasn't going right. And I took out a sticky note and wrote, "How is that working for you?" And I stuck it up there. And as soon as I stuck it up there, I thought, it's not working for me right now. Okay, what can I do right now? I don't have to think about the big picture.
Yeah,
Why isn't it working for me? But
yeah,
why is it working for me right now? And that was the step I took. And I realized that I go through these bouts of writing. I can write every single day for a month or two. Then I'll sit down to write. Nothing comes to mind. And I sit here thinking, well, that's ridiculous. Why aren't I writing? But I finally have gotten to the point, you know what? If I have nothing to write, it's okay.
yeah,
And I've had people every once in a while, they'll contact me and say, you don't have any new messages on your website. It's like, yeah, you're right. I'll get there. Now it's just not the time. So that's the permission that I've had to give myself, that it's not like I'm working a 9 to 5 job and my job says I have to put something out online every single day. I'm going to
very
put that
true.
online when I have the feeling I want to write.
Yeah.
But sometimes we don't have those choices, and we have to then learn to live with the things that we don't have choices for.
Yeah, and that's, I think, where the tiny brave steps come in. And which is why, I call myself a tiny brave steps coach now, because, you know, all of these things, like, okay, actually, I created a chat GPT generator. It's called Tiny Brave Steps Generator for this very reason. And it's so cool. I am amazed at the technology. But, you can go there and you can say, okay, I don't feel like writing today. I have this thing coming up. I don't know what to do. I can't get myself to the point where the fire is lit, you know? And then it'll talk you through it. And I have actually used ChatGPT a lot for this. Like, I call it having a coach in your pocket, this generator. And it'll give you just one step. First of all, a 90-second step to say what, first of all, do what you said, write exactly what you feel like doing, or what is it that inspires you to write, or what do you love about being yourself, like to tap into that depth inside. And then after that, it'll give you 5 minute steps, which can be as simple as, light a candle, read something that really inspires you that you've written in the past. something that you want to give to other people, that you loved having put out there. Sometimes that will then spark. But those are the examples, like just little steps can lead us into a place where we need to be. And we need to not get so uptight and so worried that we're never going to get there, because that's that fear kicking in. And instead, we need to be really gentle with ourselves and really just allow ourselves to start stepping into the things that we're good at, the things that we love to do.
Well,
So,
and there's one baby step that we all need to take, and that means to walk away for a few minutes.
yes, there's
You know,
another.
I always say, and you're in Canada, so you probably understand gray skies as much as I do, but
Yeah.
wintertime is just not my time of the year. And um, when I first went through all this change and I was depressed, it was wintertime. And I'd look out the window and it'd be like, it's gray, it's cold, it's snowing, I
Yeah.
hate it. And I don't know where it came from as I'm looking at the clouds and I'm realizing the sun is shining on the other side of the clouds. Wow.
Yeah.
So if the clouds,
What a great thought.
and that's how I live at this point, because today we got beautiful blue skies and the sun is out. It's the first
Yeah.
time in a week. So I'm like enjoying it here in my office. But
Nice.
when it is cloudy like it was yesterday
Yeah.
and it was cold and you're thinking it's June, it should be sunny, I should be warm, I'd like to be outside, I'd like to go to the pool, all these things. In the past, I would have just gotten more and more depressed as I thought about it. But as I thought about how terrible it looked outside, it was like the sun is there
Yeah.
and it's going to be out again. And
Yeah.
maybe I'll see it later today or tomorrow. And
Yeah.
so I started thinking just a little bit ahead of time and taking those steps. And
Yeah.
it doesn't help everybody who has deep, dark depression. And so that's not the people that we're talking to today.
No.
The woman like you and I who goes through something in her life and realizes I'm not enough.
Yeah.
And then has to figure out you are enough. Find those things that spark you. And I
Yeah.
can see with you, it is coaching, it is writing, it's making that connection with somebody, that maybe in the beginning, this isn't going to work for me, Bernice. I don't get it. And then all of a
Yeah.
sudden, they're in a session. It was like, you know what? I'm getting it. I'm making a
Yeah.
change.
Yeah. And, in light of that, I often in fact, it's interesting you bring that up, because I have sometimes in a coaching session, it's like, I don't know what to tell this person. I don't know how to help them. But it's just like what you were saying about focusing on the strengths and about focusing on the fact that the sun is behind the clouds, not on all the weaknesses, not on all the fact that the day is gray and like, well, we have a lot of smoke here right now that's
Yeah.
covering up, from forest fire. That's not where you focus. Where you focus is on, okay, if I'm in a coaching session with somebody, this is a beautiful heart. Inside this person is a beautiful heart. I may not be able to tap right into who that person is or give them the instant answer, which is sometimes what you think you need to do as a coach. Actually, just having somebody listen, just having somebody present with them is often enough. And when I think of it, I can do that. I can be there with them. I can listen for one phrase, one thing that they say that is a strength, that is a positive, and draw that out of them a little bit more. Maybe in that session, that is all they need, right?
Well, and we live in a fast-paced world. We expect instant gratification.
Yes.
I was on medication for 3 years, and the medication just blew me up. Um, was up 30 pounds, but my
Oh,
face was like a balloon. And my doctor kept saying,
wow.
but it's controlling everything else. And I kept saying, no, it's not. Um, So when he took me off the medication, he basically said, "You're going to deflate like a balloon." And I was like so excited. I kept waiting for that to happen. And I lost about 7 pounds. My face thinned out, but didn't lose it anyplace else. And I was concerned. I said, I can't carry this extra weight. And every diet I tried just didn't work. It wasn't the right way for me to do it. And finally, in January, I was meeting with a doctor. I was recovering from a broken shoulder. And I said, I can't even do my exercises right now. I don't have a lot of appetite, but I'm not losing weight. And his first comment was, we got to work on that shoulder, got to get that shoulder to mend. I said, I know, but
Wow.
I don't have the energy to even do physical therapy for it because I am overweight and it's even stretching my arm out.
Yeah.
I felt like I couldn't breathe. So they sent me to physical therapy. I had the best physical therapist I could ever want. Because instead of saying, oh no, Karen, you got to do that 10 times, she was talking my coaching manner. It was like, okay, move it out a little bit. Okay, how does that feel? And, it'd be like, well, I'm not really doing anything. Oh,
Yeah.
you want to do it a little bit more? Oh, go ahead. And this is how it's been. And because my mindset started to change, my weight started to change.
Wow. That's awesome.
And again, it's not like I'm obese and so I absolutely had to lose the weight. I'm losing it for me. So I can feel good about me. And
Yes.
knowing that certain things were holding me back. And that's what my physical therapist said to me. She said, so when you were on all these diets, what all were you doing? I said, oh, I was spending time at the grocery store and reading labels. She said, and how was your anxiety? And I said, pretty bad. And she goes, that's one of the reasons you didn't lose weight. Your
Yeah.
body was not doing what it had to do. And now my anxiety level is almost at a zero, although we all have anxious things in our life that come up daily. But I can now think through the process. I can think, oh, I think I'm hungry. Am I really hungry? Do I need something to eat? What do I need to do? Same thing with the exercises for my arm. I want more range of motion. And you know what? Instead of doing this 4 times a day, I'm going to do it 4.5 times a day.
Yes.
And that's how you build it. And I'm sure that's what you see with your clients as well. They expect day one, they're going to get the answer. And there is no magic answer.
No, that's true. And I love the fact that you brought up that whole what's behind the action that you take. Because really what you are saying is, this is the person I want to be. I want to be somebody who can move their shoulder. I want to have that mobility as I get older. I don't want to lose the use of that arm. I want to be somebody who feels healthy, somebody who is vibrant. And in order to do that, then I need to change how I eat. I need to not use food to be dependent on as a comfort, or I need to not stress over the fact that this is how I am. I need to just embrace who I am. And, this is the person I want to be. And I think that just shifts that whole focus, that whole anxious feeling. And, people, what I find with coaching is that people are resistant almost to do that because it's not the way they're used to thinking. They're used to living up to a standard. Oh, I need to lose this weight because then I'll be accepted. This is the body that people should have. And so I need to get that body or I'm not acceptable. But when you shift that to say, this is the person I want to be, the person I want to be, this is who I am. In fact, my husband and I, we've done a lot of Tony Robbins listening.
Okay.
And, actually, that's where I walked on fire at his live conference
Oh,
in
wow.
Los Angeles. Yeah, it was on my bucket list. Anyways, what we have started to say is, I am the kind of person who, this is who I am, and then, it becomes more living from your values rather than living from a place of trying to meet other people's standards or the standard that somebody else is putting on you. In my book, the second section is all on, who tells you who you are? You know, a very, very important question, a key question in my life. It's like, who am I letting tell me who I should be? I need to only be like myself and my creator tell me who I am, because he made me the way I am and I choose to be who I am. So I need to then find out, who am I in here? What do I like? What do I not like? What makes me comfortable? What makes me not comfortable? What will I tolerate? What will I take? And will I never accept? So even with losing weight, I think that when you begin to think, I am the kind of person who wants to be healthy for my grandchildren, who wants to not have a heart attack at 60 years old.
Yeah,
I want to feel alive and feel like I can have the energy to live my life. That starts to shift that whole reason for why you're rejecting that food.
exactly. Exactly. Well, Bernice, how can our listeners find you and get your books and maybe come to you for coaching?
I am what I would really love listeners to have access to today is the Tiny Brave Steps generator, which is absolutely free. They can go to tinybravesteps.com and there they can sign up for it. And then they have access to that wonderful coaching that will take them through. They can put any struggle, any problem into that chat GPT that's designed especially to help come up with tiny brave steps to move them forward right away. They get a 90-second step, they get 2 5-minute steps, and a daily practice that can begin to help them. Other than that, they can also go to my website, bernicemcdonald.com, and that's where the rest of who I am is listed
There.
there.
Wonderful. Well, it's been lovely talking to you.
You
I'm
as well.
hoping that those forest fires can get put out in a short period of time. Um,
Yeah.
we're living in very strange times. Um,
Isn't it true?
this is the second time in my life that I really have heard of a forest fire in Canada. I'm sure there have been others, but the last two, your smoke has drifted down into Ohio. So we fear for you guys as well, but you take care. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
And it was delightful.
It's been great being here, Karen. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Bye bye now.
Bye.